I'm Dr. LaDonna Boyd, and welcome to the February 2023 lesson series from R.H. Boyd. This unit is entitled God's Call and Its Responsibilities, and it has 4 lessons from 1 Corinthians, 2 Timothy, James, and 1 Peter. These lessons teach us that God's call and the responsibilities of that call is without regard to an individual's past. The first lesson reminds us that God's wisdom may seem flawed to people because He often chooses those who are neither wise nor powerful or of noble birth to fulfill His mission. In the second lesson, Paul's final letter brims with emotion as he encourages Timothy to embrace the suffering that accompanies the gospel, which is the responsibility of those who are called with the holy calling. The third lesson warns against showing favoritism to those wearing fine clothes because in God's economy, the poor receive God's blessing. Finally, the fourth lesson challenges us to check our attitudes and live as chosen, royal, holy people who have been called out of darkness into God's marvelous light. The February 5th lesson is entitled Wisdom and Foolishness, and it comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 18 through 31. We can all be strengthened through maintaining daily relationships with those who provide good counsel. Where do we find true wisdom when facing life's challenges? God calls us into a relationship with Jesus, who is the source of wisdom, understanding, and guidance. We should never stop wanting to gain the knowledge and wisdom that only God and His Word can give. In the lesson, Paul left Corinth and went to Ephesus when he received word that there were some problems in the church. These problems brought about turmoil and divisions, no different from modern church issues of today. And so, Paul writes to them in 1 Corinthians to remind them of the unity they now have as members of the body of Jesus Christ. The problem with the church at Corinth is that they were selfish in their thinking, and selfish thinking leads to self-preservation or the saving of self. But with God, there is no room for selfish thinking because this kind of thinking leads to self-seeking and self-serving, which will ultimately end up in self-destruction. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 18 through 20 says, "For the message about the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to those who are being saved it is the power of God. For it is written, when I destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world?" It is amazing that God chooses to use unworthy persons to preach and teach His word, not with shame but with dutiful pride. Therefore, no one can brag about their salvation, and neither can they boast about their accomplishments as followers of Jesus Christ. It was all God's doing. The lesson for February 12th is entitled Trust and Encouragement from 2 Timothy chapter 1, verses 3 through 14. In this lesson, Paul is reminding Timothy of how much he cares for him and the ministry that has been assigned to Timothy. He also wants Timothy to be very mindful of what has been poured into him by his mother Eunice and his grandmother Lois. The faith that is passed from Timothy's mother and grandmother is a reminder that often the faith is carried from one generation to the next in families. One of the most important things that each and every believer can do is live faithfully so that his or her children will want to follow in their steps of faith. 2 Timothy chapter 1 verses 3 says, "I am grateful to God, whom I worship with a clear conscience, as my ancestors did, when I remember you constantly in my prayers at night and day." Verses 6 through 7 says, "Wherefore I put thee in remembrance that thou stir up the gift of God, which is in thee by the putting on of hands. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind." Paul instructs Timothy to stir up the gift, or to blend it and mix it up. He simply needs Timothy to flame the gifts that God has given. The calling to serve God, to preach and teach the gospel, often comes with a high degree of sacrifice and suffering. This is not something for which to be ashamed. We must draw on our strength not only from God, but also from our ancestors. Many of us are living the prayers and dreams of our grandparents. Faith's influence grows through the generations. The lesson for February 19th is entitled The Rich and the Poor from James chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. The author of this letter is James, who was likely the half-brother of Jesus Christ. He was a leader within the new church and had first-hand experience of how fellow Jews treated each other. Have you noticed when we gather together as an assembly, whether as a congregation or at a football game or a concert, what we pay attention to? Many times it is our seat selection and how it relates to others in our setting. Or do we notice the clothes that we wear or those of others? Have you ever been to a very nice 5-star restaurant where the environment and decor is what set the place apart? Take the opportunity to reflect on why developing a spirit of compassion for others will help us to not judge them. Often we seek validation from external expressions of wealth, favoritism, access, and so on. Many carry the same sentiments into the house of worship. Church should not reflect the values of the larger world, but should reflect the ethics of God. Do you think that certain people in your church feel that they should have special rights reserved just for them alone? Church should be welcoming to all. Each of us have a place and purpose in the kingdom and are on different paths of our journey. We should embrace valuing each person in the same merciful way in which God values everyone. The lesson for February 26 is entitled An Important Role from 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. Christians must serve God by being a witness to others about Christ because we were chosen by God to carry out his call and purpose. One of the challenges of life is overcoming rejection, and we can share our positive experiences from following the call that God has placed on their lives to show younger generations what it means to be chosen. One of the first steps involved in building a house is the laying of the foundation. The architect draws up the blueprints and contractors follow it to erect the structure. Without a good foundation, no matter the beauty of the edifice, it will not stand strong for very long. This lesson emphasizes that Christ is the chief cornerstone upon which everything in life must stand. Peter used the house and stone analogy in a spiritual sense to help his audience understand that being a follower of Christ was superior to worshiping in temples built for idols. When people believe in him and follow his ways, the Bible describes them as living stones or support in the work of the kingdom of God. Those who reject Christ become stumbling blocks not to the faithful, but to themselves. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9 says, "But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light." Those who are a part of God's church are called his own. If we are called to grow in grace, we ought to fervently hunger for the spiritual milk of the word. In doing so, we will rid ourselves from the vices of malice, envy, guile, and insincerity. This will result in a stronger community of saints, one that is built upon Jesus Christ, who is our chief cornerstone. This concludes the February lesson series. In closing, when it comes to understanding the extent of God's love and why God would send his only begotten Son down to a cruel and mean world to save humanity, it cannot be rationalized. There are no limits on true love. We all have acceptance and have been chosen by God to serve in his kingdom. Again, I'm Dr. LaDonna Boyd, and I hope that you enjoyed these lessons. Don't forget to check out our website, www.rhboyd.com, for additional tools and resources. Also, check out our social media accounts at rhboydco and subscribe to our YouTube channel for lessons and future updates.